On Lenox Avenue, they'd drawn him like a monster in the margins, white smile, sharper teeth. So when Imani Brooks finally stepped into the gold-lit lobby where the billionaire lived, she carried the neighborhood in her chest and the warnings in her throat, and still, she pressed the elevator button. Welcome back to CJ Stories, where we bring you emotional and heart-touching stories that speak to the soul. If you're just joining us for the first time, you're welcome to this wonderful big family. We're so glad to have you here. Please make sure to watch till the end, and if today's story moves you, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, give us a like, and share this video with your family and loved ones. Now, let's dive into today's story. The morning the notice went up, Imani woke to the hiss of the radiator and the smell of fresh coffee from the neighbor downstairs, the scent weaving through the hall like a promise. Her building on Dean Street was a patchwork of old brick and older stories, bake sales on stoops, babies on hips, someone always fixing something with duct tape and a prayer. From her window, the city was soft in that thin light, the roofs glazed with last night's drizzle, the sirens still respectful and far. She tied her scarf, slid her keys into her coat pocket, and checked her phone. 12 unread messages. She was late already. The Juniper Center, her Juniper, opened in 30 minutes, and she still needed to stop by the bodega for fruit and those honey cinnamon granola bars the kids devoured in exactly 3 minutes and 20 seconds. She could practically hear them already. Miss Imani, you said you'd teach us the song today. Her reflection in the hall mirror paused, her hand on the knob. Same face she'd had all her life, eyes that hadn't learned how to soften, a mouth that kept forgetting to smile, brown skin that warmed to the sun with a clarity that made her grandmama proud. Take up space, baby, Mama Joy would say, patting Imani's shoulders as though polishing armor. The world's been ready for you since before you were born. When Imani hit the sidewalk, the city shrugged off its mourning. Trucks argued against the curb. Steam stacked out of manholes. The mural of the block's heroes watched from the corner, paint bright with fresh love. She hugged her coat tighter and rounded onto Nostrand. The bodega bell did its impatient ring when she swept inside, her cart rattling over cracked tile. Morning, Im, called Luis from behind the counter, carving initials into a mango he'd never sell. You see the news? She didn't want to, which meant she did. What now? Luis reached under the counter and pulled out a folded copy of the Daily Metro, the headline so large it managed to be both taunting and bored. Vail Capital wins rezoning vote, River Point Towers TO rise. Below, a photo, Harrison Vail exiting a black car, cuffs crisp, jawline immaculate, white man in a suit worth more than the entire bodega inventory, and smiling like the decision had always been his. Luis smacked the paper with a flour-dusted hand. He's comin' for us. I told you when they put that little art gallery cafe on the corner, it's over. That man? Devil wrapped in a tux. He crossed himself for emphasis, then winked. Need oranges. 2 crates, please. Imani slid the paper back toward him, like it might burn if she held it too long. On the front page, Vail's eyes were an unbothered gray-blue. The kids had drawn a monster on the chalkboard yesterday, tall teeth, a skyline for a crown. Everyone's been calling him that, she said. Monster. But monsters usually don't get invited to ribbon cuttings. They own the ribbon, Mommy. She paid, balanced crates on crates, and took the shortcut past the laundromat where Miss Eloise shook out a sheet and scolded the dryer like a grandchild. Comfort smells, detergent, some cousin of lemon. The Juniper Center squatted on the next block, 3 stories of stubborn brick with a crooked sign that insisted it was still 1978, letters missing and everything. The building had raised Imani as much as her grandmother had. After-school art classes when they couldn't afford art, math tutoring when algebra rolled in like a storm, music rooms where Mr. Carpenter's piano let kids hit notes they didn't know lived inside them. The upstairs kitchen was where Imani learned to coax miracles from dry beans and onion soup mix, because Mama Joy always said abundance wasn't a number, it was a practice. Now, Juniper creaked because old buildings creak. It leaked when the snow melted too fast. It smelled like crayons and hope and sometimes mildew no matter how hard she scrubbed. But it was theirs. Hey, boss, said Tasha from the steps, leaning into her phone, scarf big enough to be a blanket. She grinned when she saw Imani wobble under the oranges. You know, if you compete in the strong woman competition, they give you a sash. Like a cape for girls who don't get tired. Find me a cape that can fix a broken boiler and we'll talk, Imani said, breathing around the crates as Tasha held the door. What news? Tasha nodded at the taped printout by the buzzer. City Council approves River Point, Vail Capital promises, mixed affordability. He did it. Mr. Harrison, say goodbye to Shadows Vail. I swear, men with 3 names are always the worst. His middle name isn't say goodbye to Shadows. I mean the vibe, Tasha said, trailing Imani down the hall. The building hummed to life. Heating pipes clanked like 1,000 old bones. Somewhere a radio argued with itself. Tasha lowered her voice. You sure you want to go to that gala tomorrow? Diego says he can get you in through the volunteers' entrance if we bring canned goods. The Vale Foundation's winter benefit. You mean the party where they pat themselves on the back for saving a city they also set on fire? I could skip. I mean the party where the man who can sign away Juniper with a pen is going to be 3 feet from a champagne tower and regret. If you can look him in the eye and say a whole neighborhood's watching, maybe he'll hear you. Imani set the crates on the counter and pulled her hair back. People keep telling me about his eyes. What about them? They say he looks at you like he's reading a page he wrote. Like he's already seen your end. She peeled one orange, nails sinking into the skin, the oil misting the air. The smell was a clean, early summer kind of sharp. He was the billionaire everyone warned me about, Tash. Maybe he deserves it. But I keep thinking, people talk about men like him the way folks used to talk about us. The neighborhood catches fire and somebody to blame shows up, and we need the shape more than the truth. Tasha popped a slice of orange. That's beautiful, Professor. And also, don't let him eat you. He may be a person, but he's a person who sees buildings as numbers and families as columns. Don't forget what we're dealing with. Imani stacked oranges into mountains and set out paper cups. The kids would pour the juice like they'd discovered invention. She thought of Mama Joy's neat handwriting on their scrap fridge. Feeding children is a holy thing. She thought of the photo by her office door of her mother laughing so hard her eyes disappeared. She thought of a whole city that kept telling her to either love or ignore the man with the silver hair and the sharper smile, and she knew she was going to meet him if it killed her. Not because she believed he'd be kind. Because she believed in looking at the thing you fear and naming it right. Have you ever judged someone before you met them, because everyone told you who they were? If you were Imani, would you confront the billionaire or protect your heart and your center from his charm? Tell me in the comments, what would you do, and why? By 9, the hall was a rainbow. Malik ran in wearing 2 different shoes, which was how you know it's Tuesday. Zuri braided Amina's hair while arguing with a plant about photosynthesis. Mr. Carpenter banged out chords like a man leaving breadcrumbs through a forest so overwhelming even he was a little afraid. The city outside was winter gray, but in here the blues they sang smashed against the radiator hum and made heat. Imani's desk sat in what used to be the boiler room, a long low cave lined with quilts the grandmothers made to soften concrete and old anger. She answered emails and bit back the ones she wanted to answer with all caps. She drafted a flyer for Thursday's town hall at the church on Franklin, all lowercase because capital letters had started to feel like shouting in a house where people were already trying to be heard. She resisted the itch to search Vale Capital on every site that had a search function and, after several minutes of not resisting, found a profile shot from an old magazine issue that featured him on a green leather couch, shoes off like he was still a person, captions that called him disruptor and visionary and unafraid. He was mid-laugh in the photo, teeth even and unimpeachable. White shirt, sleeves rolled, a watch that probably cost as much as an entire wing of Juniper's after-school program. There was the old rumor about how he started, some father with a modest construction company, a scholarship to Columbia, an MBA, a stint in a tech fund, a leap to development when he noticed the math worked better when you built the world you wanted instead of waiting for it to exist. There were the little paragraphs his PR team loved. He loved dogs. He could deadlift an alarming weight at 6 a.m. He donated a 7-figure check to the underfunded pediatric wing at a hospital where nurses cried when the announcement came through. He was photographed in crisp suits next to mayors and artists and worn wood school desks. He was all the things people praised when they wanted to make a man look like a building that wouldn't fall. So then why did rumors breathe around him like weather? Why did people talk about the corridors left empty by his towers? Why did she know, down to the core of her bones, that Juniper would be a memory if she didn't somehow reach the story he'd been telling himself about the good he did? Earth to Imani, said Diego, knocking on her door with the rhythms from a drumline that lived permanently inside him. The inspector's here. Says he needs to look at the west stairwell again. Again? She grabbed her notebook, her coat. We had the inspection last month. We fixed the railing and the door. What else is there to look at? Diego winced. He's got one of those faces. What faces? The faces that do this. He adopted a frown that could curdle peace. Like if you breathe wrong, he'll fine you for exhaling too hard. Imani found the inspector in the hall near the old bulletin board that remembered dances and community potlucks and a poetry night where the mic sparked joy and also fire. He had the intense neatness of a man who kept pens in a row and his hair cut with a level. He was white, mid-40s maybe, cheeks pink with indoor heat. Ms. Brooks, he said, eyes on his clipboard. We received a complaint about structural shifts in this building following the recent cold snap. From who? She already knew she wouldn't get an answer. Complaints had a way of showing up whenever Juniper made the news or one of their kids painted a mural bright enough to be seen from the train. We've been here for 45 years. We know our cracks by name. You were here last month. I'm here now, he said. And I can't ignore what I see. What do you see? She followed him to the west stairwell. There, the brick wore a hairline fracture like an old scar. The banister had been replaced. The door closed without a complaint. The smell was dust and old paint and sugar because someone had carried cupcakes this way recently and sugar hangs around. The inspector took photos. He used a small metal tool to measure something she wasn't sure could be measured. He backed up, took more photos. There's shifting. Buildings breathe, Imani said. You could stand next to a tower on Park Avenue and measure the shifting every time the wind decides to flirt. This is different. Because it's ours? Because the building is 90 years old and was not built for the weight you're asking it to carry. What weight is that? She asked, even though she knew. He looked at the line of children's coats peeking out of the cloakroom. He looked at the stairs and the handprints painted along the wall like confetti frozen in a moment of breaking into joy. The weight of now. He wrote something, then something else, then sighed, which scared her more than any word. Ms. Brooks, I need you to step outside with me for a moment. They walked to the front doors. Every sound in the building seemed turned up, a laugh, a shoe scuff, someone's small disappointment at losing a turn with the blue marker. The inspector peeled a sheet of bright orange paper from his clipboard, pressed it flat to the front glass, and smoothed the tape with his palm. The paper shouted in staccato red letters, "Unsafe, vacate immediately. Condemned pending hearing." The hall went still as if somebody had pressed pause on the city. Malik dropped his juice. Zuri's braid slipped. Mr. Carpenter stopped mid-chord, the note hanging like a bird with nowhere to land. Imani stared at the paper so hard her eyes stung, as if she could will it to say something gentler, like, please repaint. Like, we love your center so much we want to make sure it lasts forever. What does pending hearing mean? She asked, voice trying not to betray her. We can fix a crack. We can fix the things to fix. But we can't empty this building. The inspector couldn't look directly at her. It means there'll be a review. It means, out of an abundance of caution, no one can inhabit the space until the structural risks are assessed. Assessed by who? By people I don't control, he said, finally meeting her eyes as if that might forgive him. I'm just the one who posts the sign. You mean you're the one who sets the fire and promises to make sure it gets looked at? Ms. Brooks. Imani heard herself say it before she could decide not to. Did Vale Capital call in a complaint? There was a beat. Then another. In the quiet, the radiator hissed like a cornered cat. The inspector's mouth tightened, which was its own answer. I have to ask you to vacate the premises by tonight, he said, softer now. I'm sorry. Tonight, she repeated. The floor tilted, the way it does when the future you were they told you it would arrive without you. We have 80 kids in after school. We have elders that meet here after that. We have food, and blankets, and a place some people come when their homes don't know how to be home tonight. We can't just. He shifted, pen clicking once, twice. I'm sorry. The word fell between them like a coin tossed in a well that swallowed noise for a living. By afternoon, the flyers they'd lovingly taped to the front door about free homework help and Tuesday balloon animals peeled back under the pressure of an orange that wanted to be read. The grandparents arrived with cookies and found officers in the hall who shrugged apologetically and couldn't say anything to make the apology complete. Big men who'd learned to move gently slipped into whispers, and little kids who'd learned to be loud tucked their voices in their pockets and didn't know where to put their hands. The smell of orange peel from the morning felt like a planet someone else lived on. Imani collected herself piece by piece. She called Pastor Ruth at the church on Franklin and made a plan. She texted Tasha to call every parent they knew to reassure them their children were not going to be sent into the cold. She sent Diego and Mr. Carpenter to the second floor to collect what could be collected. She walked, with the kind of purpose that could argue down a mountain, into her office. She closed the door. And she cried for exactly 30 seconds, face in hands, shoulders shaking like they might find a rhythm that would shake the entire city awake. Then she stood up, picked up her phone, and called City Council's district representative. Voicemail. She left a calm, razor-edged message that would make a bureaucrat sit up a little straighter. She called her friend at the housing rights org, then the other friend who knew which inspectors answered their phones when a voice like Imani's got very clear. She called the young reporter at the local paper who wanted the big story but would take the small story if it held a whole city inside it. She did the administrative version of praying. By 5, the kids had been walked to the church in long, shuffling lines that looked like a procession for saints whose names nobody had officially recognized yet. The jitters had returned to their legs. Somebody had found a boombox that worked. Amina forgot to be sad long enough to teach Malik the dance to a song older than both their parents. It was not okay, but it was move forward. That counted. This is going to be okay, Imani told parents who wanted to believe her because they had to, and to neighbors who wanted to believe because they loved her enough to let her hold their hope. This is a pause. We'll be back. At 7, under the church's high ceiling and the scent that churches get, old wood and old prayers, Imani made the town hall into a triage room. She fielded questions, scribbled plans. Pastor Ruth prayed with her eyes open while counting heads. Diego drew a map on the chalkboard of the block and the street and the other block. We'll do pickups here, we'll drop-offs here, and somehow they had a system by the end of an hour that felt like a decade. The reporter showed up, eyes wide, recording. The inspector didn't. By 9, the church was calm enough for the exhaustion to settle on Imani's shoulders like a heavy, familiar friend she hadn't invited. She was leaning against the wall by the stained glass window, the blues and reds falling over her like a promise from a story she was still writing, when her phone buzzed. Unknown number. No location. No name. Imani, read the text. I'm sorry about what happened today. Please meet me. We need to talk about Juniper. HV. For a moment, the world was only the letters. HV weighed 100 pounds, HV weighed nothing at all, HV might as well have been a ghost. She showed Tasha, who hissed like the radiator. Block him. I can't. He has your number. That's not sexy, that's a felony. Imani stared at the message as if it might rearrange itself into something less ridiculous. If he wanted me to meet, he could have gone through the city, or the foundation, or the church. Not my phone. Don't go, Im. He'll charm you. He'll apologize with percentages and infographics and a story about his grandmother, and you'll forget why you came. I'm not forgetting. She stopped, because she didn't know what she was. To want dialogue with an arsonist? To want to touch the flame without catching? She typed, if you have something to say it now. Bubbles. Stop. Start. Stop. Imani laughed without humor. He was a man who made the city bend to his calendar, and here he was learning how to use the 3 dots. Then, I'll be at the Vale Foundation benefit tomorrow night. Come. I'll make sure you get in. 8 p.m. Ask for me at the desk. She wanted to reply with a string of words that could be thrown and catch and bruise and make a mark. She settled on, if you're playing games with me and mine, you will regret it. A long pause. Then, I believe you. Please come. She pocketed the phone like it might bite her from the inside. The air felt different, a shade colder, a beat slower. The church lights buzzed. The stained glass watched like an elder. Imani pulled her coat around her body and tried to hone her anger into a tool she could wield. The man who could wipe out her center with a signature wanted to talk. She wanted to know if his eyes looked like knowing or like doors. Don't do it, Tasha said again, softer this time, deliberate. But if you do, I'm coming with you. I have to go. Imani said it like prayer and like protest and like the truth. I need him to see me when he thinks about buildings and numbers. I need him to know what will be lost if he continues. Then we plan. Tasha braced her, hands on both shoulders. We don't go empty. You bring photos, testimonies. We bring Diego and his charm in a suit. You bring that stare that makes men confess their secrets. We do not let him control the story. They planned until the church caretaker flicked the lights twice and Imani realized she hadn't eaten since the orange peel sprayed oil like forgiveness in the morning sun. She walked home under a sky that had decided to be generous with stars, her breath a steady fog. The apartments glowed like boxes of stories, a couple laughing, a man alone with a game and a pizza, a toddler's shadow dancing just out of time to a song a parent hummed without knowing. Brooklyn breathed around her with a patience all its own. Inside her apartment, Mama Joy's quilt pinned the old couch together with kindness. On the bookshelf, a collage of Juniper kids' drawings, all the faces circles and legs like sticks that held everything up in third-grade physics defiance. On the fridge, a faded flyer for the Juniper block party of 2007 with the DJ's name spelled wrong on purpose because Mr. Carpenter was making a point. And on the coffee table, the thin folder she'd cobbled together with statistics and stories and photographs, 96 children enrolled, 12 elders housed during the blizzard last year when the heat failed and the radiators had to be coaxed back with jokes, 1,000 hours of music instruction, one woman named Latrice who found her voice in a poetry class and then a job and then a door with her name on it, and she'd called Imani on her first night in that apartment and put the phone against the door so she could hear the sound it made when it closed. She added the orange paper from the front door to the folder. It felt like proof that inequity wasn't a metaphor, or like proof that the city's heartbeat, slowed and heavy, could be heard in paper. She got into bed, but sleep was a wall she couldn't scale. She closed her eyes and saw the inspector's pen, the way it clicked like an apology. She saw Harrison Vale's magazine photo and tried to imagine the muscle moving under that perfect suit while he lifted a glass and changed the shape of the block. She saw Juniper empty, the halls echoing with the ghosts of laughter that had no bodies now, no mouths to wear it. She saw her grandmother's hands, steady, steady, steady. In the morning, she put on power the way some people put on mascara. She chose a navy dress from the back of the closet that had a better memory of summer than she did. She put on boots that said she wasn't here to be tripped by anyone. She texted Diego, 7:30 p.m. meet me on the corner. He replied with a flex emoji she couldn't hate if she tried, and Tasha with a string of advice disguised as jokes. The day was a blur of logistics. She moved boxes from Juniper to the church. She attended a meeting with the Coalition on Housing Rights where everyone's metaphors were weapons and also bandages. She smiled at Ms. Eloise at the laundromat and took a bag of still warm socks for the kids like a communion. And every hour, on the hour, she thought of 8 o'clock. By 7:30, she stood with Tasha and Diego at the corner of 57th and Lexington, the world reflecting a different kind of cold. Vale Tower was a gleaming finger of steel, pointing at a sky that pretended this was an ordinary evening. The lobby's glass was so clear it made a lie of itself, even looking in felt suspect, and she paused on the sidewalk to be sure she still belonged to the part of the city that had raised her. Okay, Diego said, peering at the revolving doors like a man studying an alien artifact. If they ask, we're here to make a donation of canned tomatoes and also truth. Tasha tugged her coat collar up. If they ask, we're here to bless this place with our audacity. Imani slipped the folder out of her bag and held it like a shield. If they ask, we're here because we always have been. The revolving door sighed and pulled them into a different temperature. This was a lobby that knew how rich it was. The floor was marble, the less shiny kind that suggests it has lived a life. A cauldron-like mobile hung from the double-height ceiling like a thought in motion. The staff at the front desk wore tuxedo-adjacent uniforms that tried not to be uniforms. The air smelled like lilies and fresh paper and the scent of something expensive that had figured out how not to smell like anything at all. They moved as a unit to the desk. The woman behind it looked up with professional kindness and, when she saw Imani, something else. Curiosity, maybe. Or recognition. Good evening, she said. Welcome to the Vale Foundation Winter Benefit. Names? Imani opened her mouth to say, we're not on the list, and we know it. Instead, the woman said, Ms. Imani Brooks? Imani blinked. Yes. He asked me to let you through. Mr. Vale is expecting you. The woman slid 3 visitor badges across the desk, each one printed with their names as though the building had been practicing the letters. Please take the private elevator to the 39th floor. Someone will meet you there. Imani swallowed. The words were a trick. Or they were a trap. Or they were something she hadn't even learned to imagine yet. She took the badge, saw her name under a logo that seemed to smile in a language that hadn't heard of frowns. She glanced at Tasha, who lifted her chin, and at Diego, who mouthed, we are not afraid, even if his knees said otherwise. The elevator bank glowed at the back of the lobby, wood panels so smooth she wanted to apologize for touching them. White stone. Soft light. Everything behaving. They stepped into a car that smelled like cedar and ambition. The door slid closed like a secret fulfilled. Hold a voice called from the lobby, and a hand reached into the narrowing gap. The doors opened obediently. He stepped in. He looked exactly like the pictures and nothing like them. People always do. The photographs knew his angles, his suits, the slice of his smile. In person, he was a man with height and presence he didn't have to perform. Ash blonde hair, cut short and indifferent. Pale skin that told on his stress at the edges. The line of his jaw doing that story people love to tell about strength and purpose. He wore a charcoal suit and no tie, as if to say this was a night off from being a machine. His gray-blue eyes flicked over them, cataloging, landing on Imani. Ms. Brooks, he said. The elevator doors closed. The floor number lit up, 1, 2, 3, I'm glad you came. Imani held the folder like a weapon and her breath like it might run if she didn't watch it close. The elevator hummed upward, numbers winking into light. She asked the question before he could speak again, each word its own small blade, did you shut down Juniper? The lights in the ceiling dimmed, not a malfunction, just a building deciding to set a mood, or the universe lowering its voice. Harrison Vale didn't flinch. He met her eyes with something that wasn't the caricature of a smile she'd seen on billboards and, for the first time that day, looked like he might be the one surprised. I did something worse, he said, and the elevator kept climbing. I built the reason it could be shut down. The car slid past 27. Past 30. The city fell away into a carpet of light. Imani felt the answer coil in her chest like a storm moving over warm water. Diego and Tasha froze beside her, breath held for a future that hadn't introduced itself yet. The doors did not open. The ride did not end. And somewhere above them, in a room full of donations and speeches, a man who had promised himself he could build his way out of grief waited for whatever this was going to be. The elevator eased open onto a spill of soft music and colder light. A ballroom stretched bright with glass and linen, a city on a table. But Harrison angled them into a quiet side gallery where the air was cooler, the lilies less sweet, the view a dark sequined river. "I didn't order a shutdown," he said, standing but not looming. "But our excavation for River Point is dewatering the soil. Old foundations shift when groundwater does. My team flagged a risk radius. Somebody, inside or allied, turned that into leverage." "Your risk is my home," Imani replied, the folder against her ribs. "You knew this could happen." "I did. I thought shoring would be enough. I was wrong." A muscle in his jaw worked. "And I think a complaint was filed under a civic-sounding shell. We've used advocacy fronts before. I'm not pretending clean hands." Diego bristled. "Then wash them." Harrison exhaled. "I can fund emergency shoring and challenge the vacate order. I can halt our deep digs near Juniper by morning. But my board will fight it. For them, what's rational lives on a spreadsheet. People live off the spreadsheet," Imani said. 80 kids. Elders. Artists. We're not abstractions." His gaze held, steady, unperformed. "I know," he said, and she believed that he wanted to. "I grew up in Ohio. When my mother died," he stopped, recalibrated. "When she died, the only place that made sense was a center like yours. I paid to rebuild one in Cleveland. When property values spiked, the board dissolved it and sold the land. That was on me. I told myself I'd never be sentimental about buildings again. That I'd build systems." "Systems crush," Tasha said softly. Harrison nodded once. "Sometimes." He slid a thin file across the table. Emails. A memo with the branded letterhead of a Northlight Civic Safety Alliance, threatening lawsuits if unsafe structures near River Point weren't immediately condemned. A routing note from a deputy commissioner at buildings. And a donation receipt to Northlight from a Vail-adjacent donor network. Imani's stomach dropped. "You don't just build towers," she whispered. "You build the wind and then pretend you didn't feel it." He didn't flinch. "I'm trying to unbuild this one." A young staffer in a black headset burst through the door, breathless. "Mr. Vail, sorry, urgent. A city marshal just sealed the Juniper Center. There's a fast-track emergency demo request for Friday." The word demo hit like a door slamming on a hand. Imani's vision narrowed to a keyhole of fury. Friday. 2 days. The room's soft music seemed to mock her. "Who filed it?" Harrison asked, voice gone blade flat. The staffer swallowed. "It's flagged by buildings under an imminent hazard clause, routed through the deputy commissioner's office. The complaint folder references Northlight. And, sir, it's CC'd to City Hall." Tasha's mouth fell open. Diego swore under his breath. Harrison's phone was already in his hand. "Hold all excavation within 2 blocks of Juniper," he told someone. "Now. Get Keller from Structures, and Morel from Legal, to Juniper. I'm going there. And find out which deputy signed this." He ended the call and looked at Imani. "We go now." Imani tucked the file under her arm and nodded. "We go." The ballroom beyond had become a mirage. The elevator whooshed like a held breath. Outside, the night had hardened, taxis beating along Lexington like bright insects. Harrison's driver eased the car into the stream. Inside, leather and quiet; outside, wind skittered trash into constellations. Imani watched the city pass as if it might confess. "Why text me?" she asked, not looking at him. "Why not issue a statement like men like you do?" "Because you'd see through a press release," Harrison said. "And because I've gotten very good at fixing things from far away. This isn't that." "You mean this is messy?" Tasha said. He almost smiled. "Yes." The car peeled onto Atlantic. Construction floodlights painted the sky false daylight. At Juniper's block, barricades sprouted like weeds, city tape X'd the front doors. A marshal stood with a clipboard. A small cluster of curious neighbors formed a semicircle of worry. The orange notice glared from the glass, unsafe. Imani was out of the car before it fully stopped, boots hitting cold concrete, breath steaming. "I need to see the permit," she told the marshal, voice iron smooth. "Ma'am, you can't." "She can," Harrison said, stepping forward, the temperature around them shifting at the recognition of power. "Harrison Vail. I need to speak to the deputy who signed this. And to the building's liaison on site." The marshal blinked, recalibrated. "Sir, Mr. Vail, this came from upstairs." "I'm upstairs," Harrison said, not unkind. "Call them. And nobody touches this building tonight." Imani pressed a palm to the door's cool glass, the building's pulse thudding under her skin like a drum she knew the rhythm of. Her eyes burned. Memory swam at the edges, the smell of crayons, Mr. Carpenter's warm cords, Malik's mismatched shoes. She whispered, "We're still here," to the bricks, as if the building were a living thing that needed reminding. A city SUV pulled up. Out stepped a man in a navy coat with a bureaucrat's tired smile. The deputy commissioner, face recognizable from hearings and headlines. "Mr. Vale," he said, shaking Harrison's hand. "Ms. Brooks. We're acting out of caution. The old stairwell is compromised. The soil data shows." "Your soil data comes from my project," Harrison interrupted. "Which I have now paused. Shoring crews are on the way." The deputy's eyes flicked to Imani, then back. "Even so, the emergency order stands until a hearing tomorrow. We can't risk a collapse." "Emergency demo by Friday?" Imani shot back. "You couldn't schedule a parent-teacher conference that fast." He lifted both hands, a peaceable gesture that made her ache with rage. "No one wants that. It's a placeholder. Paper moves faster than concrete." "Paper becomes concrete," Tasha said. The deputy's phone lit up. He glanced down, then looked up with a carefully blank expression. "I have to take this," he said, stepping aside. Harrison leaned closer to Imani. "If they try to move tonight, I'll get an injunction. I can't promise the politics, but I can slow the machines." "Slow them until what?" she asked. "Until we disappear?" A sound cut through the chill, a faint thud from inside, then a muffled whimper. Imani's body recognized it before her brain did, the small, choked sound of a child trying not to cry. She froze. "Did you hear that?" Diego was already moving along the wall. "Hello? Anyone inside?" He rapped the glass, ear pressed, breath fogging. Again, a tiny sound from somewhere near the back staircase. A voice, little and stubborn. "Miss Imani?" Imani's heart ricocheted. "Malik. Malik," she shouted, both hands flat on the glass now. "Where are you?" "Got stuck," came the thin reply. "Came for my science project." Imani threw her weight against the door. The marshal grabbed her arm, she shook him off, eyes wild. "There's a child inside," she snapped, every vowel a command. "Open the door." "The structure is unstable," the deputy called, hurrying back, phone still in his hand. "If you open it?" "If I don't, he's alone," she said, voice gone quiet and deadly. She looked at Harrison. "Help me." Harrison had already pulled out his phone. "Keller, now," he said. "Back entrance, west stairwell. Quietly. And bring air monitors." He slipped the phone away and met Imani's eyes. "We're getting him out." The door held, the building breathed, and somewhere inside, Malik's breath turned thin with fear. Sirens approached, close, hungry. A construction floodlight swung, throwing their shadows tall and trembling across the brick, Imani's hand raised, Harrison's face set, a city about to decide what it wanted to be. Keller's truck rolled up in a growl of diesel and certainty. Two structure specialists swung out, winter-bright vests, hard hats, eyes that had seen old bones in older buildings and knew how to listen. Air monitors blinked green. A coil of collapsible shoring jacks clattered like sturdy metal prayer. "We go through the west entrance," Keller said, quick, efficient. "Air's clean. The load path on the central stair is compromised, but I can brace for a narrow egress. Minimal bodies inside." "I'm going," Imani said. Keller shook his head. "You can't. Liability." Harrison's voice cut, calm. "She knows the building better than anyone. She leads. We minimize time." The deputy commissioner cleared his throat, coat collar turned up against the cold. "Mr. Vale, if anything." "If," Harrison said evenly, "I'll own it." "Funny," Diego muttered. "Owning things is his talent." Imani didn't wait. She took the headlamp Keller offered and fastened it with hands that trembled once and then remembered who they belonged to. The west entrance groaned, then yielded. Cold air became colder. Dark became texture, stair edges, the slick shine of dust on old banisters, the outline of a mural that had watched them grow. "Malik," she called, voice ricocheting. "It's Ms. Imani." A hiccup of a sob. "Here." Keller swept his light in a practiced arc, "Back stairwell landing," he said. "Something's pinned." They moved, Imani in front, Keller at her shoulder with a brace, Harrison behind them with a second jack like he'd been born to carry weight. The corridor smelled like crayon wax and damp paper. The floor complained, a long, aching note that told a story of every kid that had stomped down this hall laughing. Dust motes hung in the headlamp beams like slow galaxies, a constellation of drywall sparkled where the ceiling had given up a patch. On the landing, a storage rack lay tipped, a calculus of geometry and peril. Paints, paper reams, a bucket of marble scattered like frozen rain. Malik's sneaker stuck out, toe scuffed from a year of playground arguments. He was wedged in a triangle of space against the wall, small chest rising too fast. "I'm here," Imani said, dropping to her knees. Tears made everything double and then single again. "Look at me. You're okay." He did, eyes wild and then calmer. "Miss Imani, I came for my planets. Ms. Zuri said I could bring them home. I didn't make it to Neptune yet." "We'll get you to Neptune," she promised, ridiculous and perfect. "We're going to lift this slow. Don't try to help. Just breathe." Keller eased the first jack into place, back braced, a man listening with his whole body. "On 3, he said. 1, 2, he didn't say 3, he let the brace take the load in a smooth, quiet rise. A metallic sigh. The rack shifted a hair, then another. Harrison slid the second jack into place without being asked. His suit didn't belong here and, somehow, it did. Imani slid a hand under Malik's arm. "Can you wiggle toward me?" A thin nod. A breathless scoot. The shelf creaked, the building answered with a low, disapproving groan. "Stop," Keller said. "Hold." The wall shuddered. Above them, something big shifted, a deep, throat-clearing sound of a staircase remembering its age. A hairline crack spidered along the landing plaster, and a paint chip sailed down, slow motion, like a tiny white leaf. Keller swore softly. He angled his headlamp up, light catching on the edge of a steel angle brace, there, where the main stringer met the landing, bright, raw scrape marks. "That's cut," he said, voice an octave lower. "That brace didn't fail, it was compromised. Recent. Not rust." Imani's head snapped up. "Cut, how?" "Handsaw, reciprocating." "Blade chatter," Keller said, in the same voice you'd used to describe a storm you'd studied. "Someone wanted this to move." A sawed brace. Not shifting. Sabotage. Imani's heartbeat found a new gear. Rage and fear braided and burned steady. "Who would?" "Later," Harrison said, quiet, steady, eyes flicking from brace to boy to Imani. "We get him out." Keller's jaw worked. He read the building's breath, the way you read the chest of a loved one asleep. "Okay," he said, making peace with physics. "Ms. Brooks, when I say now, pull him to you. Mr. Vale, hold that jack. If it dips, push. Little man, you're going to be a noodle. You know how noodles are?" Malik blinked tears. "Wiggly." "Exactly," Keller said. "Ready." Imani's hand was steady on Malik's shoulder. "Now," Keller said. Malik slid free like an unspoken prayer. The jack sang. The shelf tilted toward their knees and then stilled. Dust bloomed. Malik coughed. He hit Imani's chest with the weight of relief. She laughed and it broke and returned as a sob. She kissed his hair and tasted chalk. In the corridor, a sound bled through, the thin siren of a news van, the bass note of a crowd collecting. Outside, a city held its breath. If you were Imani, would you have gone inside with Harrison to get Malik, or waited for the official rescue team? Do you trust someone you feared in a moment like this? Drop your take in the comments. I'm curious how you measure risk and trust when seconds matter. They moved back the way they came, slower than impatience wanted, faster than fear. The landing moaned, Keller held, listening for the murderous syllable in the building's vocabulary and not hearing it. The corridor widened. The air smelled like cold again. They reached the west door. The night struck them with relief. The crowd exhaled in one sound. "Malik!" Zuri cried, elbowing past a barrier to throw a hoodie around his shoulders. Ms. Eloise from the laundromat was crying and scolding in the same breath. A paramedic crouched by the boy, light gentle on his pupils, voice a song of questions. Imani stood because she had to. Harrison took a step back and let the attention move around Malik the way it should. The deputy commissioner hustled forward, words at the ready. "We're grateful he's safe. But given what just happened." "What just happened," Imani said, voice even as a plumb line, "is that you nearly condemned a child in a building you claimed was too dangerous to step into. We didn't wait for your process to finish measuring our lives. We saved one." Keller lifted his head. "And someone cut a brace," he said, addressingly neutral. "We'll file a report." "That's not weathering. That's intention." The deputy kept his expression professional by force. "That's a serious allegation." "It's a serious fact," Keller said. The reporter from the local paper edged closer, phone held high, eyes wide. "Mr. Vale, is River Point responsible?" Harrison looked at the crowd, at the building, at Imani. He could recite a speech about hydrology and unintended consequences. He could list every good deed in his ledger and hope someone dug him a softer narrative. He didn't. "We're part of a system that creates incentives for the wrong people to do the worst things," he said, each sentence a hand over a cliff edge. "I can't tell you who cut that brace yet. But I can tell you I'm halting all River Point work near Juniper until this building is shored and safe. I'm committing funds for emergency support now. And I'm asking for a night hearing with a judge to stop any demolition order." Your board won't love that, the deputy said. My board can meet me, Harrison replied, not loud, not soft. Tonight. The crowd's energy shifted, resentment and curiosity making a new weather. The marshal on the periphery, whose job had been to say no, didn't look displeased at the idea of someone else holding the line for a minute. Imani rubbed Malik's back and stood with a spine that made the cold sit up and behave. Her eyes fell on a figure at the edge of the circle, neat hair, immaculate notebook, the inspector from that morning. He had appeared without announcing himself, like guilt deciding to watch its own work. He was texting, face carefully neutral, fingers quick. She moved toward him, he looked up, unsurprised, as if he had expected the gravity between them. You posted the sign, she said. I did, he said. Based on data. Saw a lot of that data tonight, she said. Looked like fresh teeth marks on steel to me. He shifted a fraction, the kind of movement men made when they were learning a new language very fast. I don't cut metal, Ms. Brooks, he said. I file forms. Do you file them with Northlight? She asked, tasting the name like something bitter and necessary. Or do they just send you words and you pretend you thought them up alone? A muscle in his cheek twitched. Careful, he said, but he heard himself and it sounded smaller than the night. I'm not your enemy. Then help, she said. Your system is about to crush us. Don't be the boot. He looked past her at Harrison. He looked at the deputy, at the crowd, at the cameras that had found the narrative and were hungrily rewriting it. I'll do what's in my remit, he said, and she heard, in the thinness of the answer, a thread she would pull later. The reporter's phone lit, a message on blast, emergency demo crew staging at Fulton, 2 blocks away. ETA 10 minutes. Tasha read it over the reporter's shoulder. They're really going to try, she said, weak laugh bubbling into anger. They're going to knock down our house while we're still on the stoop. Not if a judge says no, Morel from legal said into Harrison's ear, having arrived with a folder and a night judge's clerk's number and the kind of shoulders that made doors choose to open. We can get a temporary restraining order if we show potential irreparable harm and likelihood of success on the merits. Which we can, Harrison said. Keller's report. Child inside. Cut brace. Active dewatering paused. And, he hesitated, looked at Imani. An affidavit from Ms. Brooks. Write it, Imani said, uncomplicated. I'll sign with ink and blood. They moved fast. Words became anchors, paper became a shield. The deputy commissioner paced, he made calls, he told the arriving demo crew to hold position. The excavator idled, a beast with its mouth closed but teeth glinting. The streetlights hummed. The neighborhood pressed closer. Ms. Imani, Malik whispered, tugging at her coat sleeve. The paramedic had cleared him. He looked small and older in the same instant. There was a man inside, he said, leaning in so only she could hear. Not Mr. Keller. Not you. He had a white hard hat. He told me not to tell. He said he was checking the pipes but he had this little saw and he cut a thing and it made a bird sound. What did he look like? She asked, voice a wire pulled tight. Like a rectangle, Malik said, childhood trying to shape a man into a shape. He had a sticker on his hat. What sticker? A green N, he said, and then, fishing in his pocket like a magician, he dropped this. He opened his hand. A plastic badge. Northlight Civic Safety Alliance, it read, cheap laminate around clean font, clip broken. Imani's skin went cold, then hot, then steady. She lifted the badge between 2 fingers like an artifact from a ruin she'd always lived in. She looked at Harrison. He saw it. His jaw tightened, then loosened, a recalibration. He took the badge and handed it to Morel like a chess move. Photograph and attach to the filing, he said. It's circumstantial, Morel replied, but his eyes were awake. The deputy's radio crackled, a voice like a knife wrapped in velvet. Commissioner's office, it said. Proceed with immediate stabilization measures. If removal of facade sections necessary, proceed under emergency order. That's demo, Keller said under his breath. The excavator's engine revved, a dragon clearing its throat. The excavator lurched forward half a foot, hydraulic sighing, bucket rising. The demo foreman lifted a gloved hand toward his operator, eyes on the deputy for nod or no. The deputy looked at Imani, then at Harrison, then at the phone in his hand stacked with calls he couldn't ignore without losing a job that paid for daughter's doctor visits and a mortgage with stairs as old as junipers. The crowd pressed in, a low howl building, grief learning the shape of a barricade. Harrison stepped in front of the bucket. He didn't raise his hands, he simply stood the way a man stands when he's decided what kind of man he is. Imani moved with him, shoulder to shoulder, her breath fogging the cold, her voice low and unshakable. You touch our building, she said to the foreman, you touch all of us. And you do it on camera. And you do it while a judge is on the way. Somewhere, a siren wailed closer. Somewhere else, a phone rang in a quiet apartment, telling a clerk to find a robe for a judge who kept her decisions by the door. The bucket hung there, teeth inches from brick, metal reflecting streetlight and outrage. The foreman hesitated, fingers twitching toward a lever. The deputy opened his mouth to speak. And from the alley behind Juniper, a flashlight winked once, there and gone, like a signal from someone who hadn't finished what they started. The bucket's teeth hovered over brick like a threat that had learned to whisper. Then the deputy's hand cut the cold air, palm out. "Hold," he told the foreman, voice thin but decisive. The excavator idled, grumbling. "Night judges on call at King's," Morel said, phone to his ear, breath fogging. 10 minutes. We can get on the docket. The alley winked again, flashlight, quick, intentional. Diego moved first, instinct and anger making his legs choose. Keller followed, boots chewing gravel. Imani started after them. Harrison caught her sleeve and shook his head once. If it's the saboteur, let Keller clock what he needs to in case the courts pretend not to see. They rounded the corner. The alley, always a half-remembered cut between buildings, smelled like damp cardboard and cat. The light flickered once more, then disappeared into a door's shadow. Keller's beam skated along the bricks and found scuffs on the back entrance lock, fresh. "Picked," he said. He eased the door. It gave an inch, then stuck. From inside, quick footfalls, the small suck of air when someone misjudges a step. A figure in a white hard hat dashed across the shadowed hall, the green end sticker blinking like a neon lie. "Hey!" Diego shouted, old drumline muscles chasing sound. The figure bolted toward the old boiler room, then through, and out to the street on the other side. Keller cursed, almost chased, then stopped, lifted something from the floor with two gloved fingers, a shard of cheap laminate, a broken badge clip cousin to the one in Imani's pocket, stamped, NL Operations. On the back, a partial phone number, the last 4 digits clean, 4417. They re-emerged onto the block to find the excavator still pausing like an animal unsure of its trainer, the crowd's hum pressing into urgency. Light swept the street. Police set up thin lines of tape that didn't tell anybody what to feel. The deputy commissioner's phone pressed to his ear had become an extension of his jaw. "We're on at King's in 10, Morel said. "We need affidavits now. Keller, you sign on the cut brace. Ms. Brooks, you sign on irreparable harm. We'll bundle the child's presence through the paramedics' report as Exhibit B. Mr. Vale, we attach your statement on the pause dewatering and any internal doc that shows the risk radius memo." Harrison nodded once. "You'll have it." He lowered his voice to Imani. "Coming?" She looked at the building, the crowd, Malik now wrapped in Ms. Eloise's scarf like a striped flag of survival. She looked at Harrison, who had placed his body between a bucket and her center. "We go." They slid into 2 cars, Morel's sedan with Keller to get the paperwork filed en route, Harrison's black SUV with Imani, Tasha, and Diego, toward the courthouse. The city at night had that exhausted, humming feeling of a body that couldn't sleep. Steam stacked. A man shoveled salt as if it were snow. A woman in a fur-lined hood talked to a small dog like a therapist. Sirens hollered and then swallowed themselves. "Kings County Supreme," the driver said, tapping the wheel like a metronome. "I know a way." Inside the car, light glowed from dashboard screens. Harrison's phone buzzed and stayed lit, names, words, warnings marching past. Board. PR, Council. He ignored them and wrote one line to his general counsel, pause River Point all sites within 2-block radius of Juniper until further notice. Authorize shoring via Keller. Personal guarantee. He sent 3 dots. His counsel's reply came like a weather report, board will oppose. Consider optics. Consider fiduciary. Harrison's thumbs replied before his brain could tame them. Consider people. They shot down Atlantic, turned onto Borum, the courthouse materializing from cold like an old ship. Inside, fluorescent lights made everything too honest. The hall smelled like coffee, copy toner, old varnish. A vending machine buzzed. The night judge's clerk had tired kindness under her eyes and a peppermint on her desk that had stuck to the wrapper and given up trying to get free. "You're here on Brooks vs. City of New York?" she asked, flipping through a stack of midnight emergencies. "Vale Capital and the Juniper Center," Morel said. "Seeking TRO to enjoin demolition and vacate order pending hearing." "Judge Price will take you," the clerk said, tapping a file into squared edges with the brisk tenderness of someone who had saved more nights than she'd counted. "He's in chambers. Wait there." She nodded toward a bench down the hall. "He runs hot on the facts. Don't be shy with the exhibits." They sat. Keller scribbled a 1-page affidavit in block letters that read like a mechanic's sermon. Cut brace at West Stair Landing, fresh saw marks, consistent with reciprocating blade. Not structural fatigue. Imminent danger created, not organic. Child inside. He signed with an engineer's number that made the clerk's eyebrows rise and soften. Imani took the pen Morel offered and felt the weight of paper. She wrote, "We have 80 children, 12 elders, hundreds of families who use this building as their living room, classroom, kitchen, sanctuary. We can shore. We can repair. We cannot afford to be erased." She included Latrice's door story. She wrote the scent of crayons, the piano chords. She wrote the orange notice like an old bruise. She ended, "The harm is a life shattered." She signed and dated and handed the pen back like a blade she understood. Harrison handed over a packet of internal memos and a clean, one-paragraph admission. Dewatering at River Point lowered groundwater levels near Juniper. The risk radius should have triggered shoring coordination earlier. I take responsibility for that oversight and have paused deep work. The bailiff poked his head out. "Brooks versus City," he called. They stood. They entered. Judge Price was shorter than Imani expected and older than the building around him. He wore his robe like a uniform earned rather than given and looked over his glasses like a teacher who did not mind being feared on Thursdays. "You've woken my pen," he said, almost dry. "Let's see if it wants to write what you want it to." The city attorney on duty argued first, smoother than the hour allowed. "Your Honor, we don't want to demolish this building," she said. "We want to prevent a collapse. The stair is failing. The groundwater shift has weakened an already old structure. The emergency demolition is a placeholder order. It allows us to remove elements if they become unsafe." "Placeholder order is a new one," Judge Price said. "Placeholders usually go in brackets, not on buildings." Morel stepped forward. "Your Honor, irreparable harm is present tenfold. Children, elders, the cultural center of a neighborhood. We have expert evidence indicating sabotage. The stair brace was cut. We have a child's presence inside." He nodded toward the paramedics' report, and an attached pause by the developer on dewatering. "We also have a safety plan with immediate shoring by a licensed engineer." Judge Price steepled fingers. "Evidence of sabotage?" he asked. "You have a suspect? A report? Or are you bringing me allegations with your midnight coffee?" Keller stood, steady. "Your Honor," he said, engineer's cadence low and precise. "If you give me 10 minutes and the right light, I can show you saw chatter on the angle brace. That is not age. That is not stress. That is a blade. If I were to do that in my shop, it would look exactly like what I saw." "And who would cut a brace?" the judge asked, eyes flicking like a hawk's. "Someone who wanted the building to move quickly," Imani said, voice unadorned. "Show me something with names," the judge said. Morel lifted the badge in a bag. "Recovered on site," he said. "Northlight Civic Safety Alliance. We also have an email chain linking donations from Vale-adjacent donors to Northlight." Judge Price's eyebrow made it to a place it rarely visited. He looked at Harrison. "You're the Vale in question?" "Yes," Harrison said. "Northlight has been used by various civic actors. I've donated through networks that include Northlight. I will testify to the pause in dewatering and commit funds to shoring. If we're part of the conditions that created the risk, we can be part of the fix." "Your board will love that," the judge said, dry. "And the city wants a lot of things, most of them contradictory." The city attorney shifted, not quite a fidget. "Your Honor, the buildings department is acting on data. We are not in the business of punishing community centers." "Except when you are," Judge Price said. He looked like a man who had watched a lot of mechanisms operate and had lost his taste for their claims of innocence. He looked at the exhibits again. He picked up Keller's affidavit and held it like a tool. He looked at Imani, at the way she stood like a woman holding back an ocean with a folder and belief. He leaned back, about to speak. The chamber door banged open. Tasha, breathless, slid inside, phone raised like an emergency flare. "Your Honor," she said before a bailiff could scold. "I'm sorry. I know. But this matters." She thrust the phone toward Morel, who hustled it to the bench, face careful. On the screen, grainy alley camera footage from the back of Tasha's building, time-stamped 2 hours earlier. A white hard hat with a green end sticker. A man, average height, compact frame, moving like he knew where he was going. He turned his head just enough to catch half his face, clean jaw, a crescent scar at the temple. He carried a tool bag. He slipped into Juniper's back door with a key card. The reader's LED glowed green. "Where did he get a key card?" Judge Price asked, voice suddenly knife-clean. Morel zoomed. The name embossed small on the bag, Titan Earthworks. A sub-Vale used. The judge looked at Harrison over the top of the phone. "Titan is a contractor on River Point," Harrison said, voice level. "They should have no access to Juniper." "And yet," Judge Price said. Harrison pulled up his own phone, fingers moving through a maze of emails. He found what he needed and handed it to the bailiff to pass up. An internal memo from earlier that week, subject line, Non-Compliant Adjacent Structures, Civic Safety Strategy. From Arja Keen, COO. Language Corporate and Chile, coordinate with external advocacy groups to expedite municipal action on identified hazards. Reduce adjacency risk profile. Avoid direct veil liability. Judge Price read fast. He did not look surprised, which made Imani's stomach drop in an entirely new way. Mr. Vale, the judge said, either you cannot control your own shop, or you can, and this is clever hiding. Either way, I'm not letting a city eat one of its own out of convenience. He tapped his pen against the bench once, twice, and then wrote with a quick, decisive hand. Temporary restraining order granted. No demolition. No removal of structural elements. The city will allow immediate shoring under the supervision of a licensed engineer. Mr. Keller, I hope you slept this week. Buildings will inspect any work performed and will appoint an independent monitor by morning. Night hearing tomorrow at 10 for a preliminary injunction. And counsel, he looked at both sides, bring me a list of everyone who received a donation linked to Northlight in the last 18 months. He signed. The noise in the room changed, release, relief, fear trying not to find a new name. Ms. Brooks, he said, softer. Keep your people close. This isn't done. Imani blinked, once, twice, squared her shoulders. It will be, she said. Outside, the air tasted different. The block down the courthouse steps wore the same yellow light but felt like a new chapter. The reporter was there, eyes bright. Cameras had found them. Questions flew, flocking. Mr. Vale, did your company facilitate the sabotage? Ms. Brooks, do you trust the man who built the danger? Is River Point dead? Is the city complicit? Is Northlight a front? Harrison lifted a hand, not in command but in honesty. A judge has granted a temporary restraining order, he said. We will fund shoring. We will find out who cut that brace and why. If the rod is in my house, I will cut it out. If it's in the city, we will name it. For now, we stabilize a building and keep children safe. Imani stepped to the microphones because she could not stay silent. Juniper is not a number, she said. It's a home. We're not asking to be spared. We're asking to be seen as human and to be given the chance to fix what others broke. We will be here tomorrow and the day after. They moved back toward Juniper like a tide returning to shore. The excavator sat quiet, a muted, embarrassed giant. The demo crew leaned against their truck, unsure whether to be defiant or grateful to go get coffee. The deputy commissioner looked 10 years older. He nodded at Imani, not apology, not victory, acknowledgement. Keller unloaded shoring jacks, water bags, timber. We'll start with the west stair, he said. I want to catch that stringer and carry the load to the slab, then cross-brace the landing. We'll need to thread it in. He looked at Harrison. You lifting? Harrison shrugged off his jacket, handed it to Diego, and took a jack. I'm lifting. Imani held the flashlight, steady. The building's breath felt calmer. Dust had settled. Somewhere, a paper bird mallet made in first grade still hung twisted, catching cold light and making it warm. They worked until fingers stung and found new heat. Keller talked physics the way some men tell bedtime stories. Beams wed, angles kissed, weight learned a kinder path. The landing's groan turned into a sigh of relief. The jack's thread squeaked like a protest that had been heard. Imani's headlamp made halos on old paint. Harrison's white shirt took gray smudges like reminders. By 3, the shoring held. Keller clapped the metal with the affection of someone who believed in things he could measure and also magic. She'll stand, he said, patting the old wall. Until we do it proper, she'll stand. A car door thudded at the curb. Another black SUV. Another set of suits. This time, not Harrison's crew. The man in front wore a coat that cost something and an expression that cost him nothing. He moved like he expected the space to tilt toward him out of habit. Roland, Harrison said, voice gone cool as steel. Roland Keen's smile was all top-row teeth. White, tidy, transactional. He offered his hand and then didn't seem offended when Harrison didn't take it. You've been busy, he said, eyes traveling over the shoring with a bland curiosity that suggested he'd toured the world's wonders and found them all slightly too humid. We've been saving a building, Harrison said. We got a TRO. We'll be in court in the morning. So I've heard, Keen said. I've also heard the board is concerned. You paused a flagship project. You went on record taking responsibility for groundwater issues. You may as well have invited litigation up to your lintels. He tilted his head, bird-like. The board has convened an emergency meeting at 7 a.m. to discuss interim leadership. Diego let out a sound that lived somewhere between a laugh and a curse. Tasha folded her arms tight against her chest. You mean they're going to try to fire you, Imani said, blunt. They're going to protect the company, Keen said, eyes landing on her for the first time. It's what boards do when founders become liabilities. I'm not a founder, Harrison said. I built this phase. But I hear the threat. Not a threat, Keene said lightly. An inevitability. You've gotten sentimental, H. That's not what we do. He turned to go, and then turned back, a flicker of something unguarded showing and then hiding. By the way, careful who you talk to about Northlight. They don't like lights turned on. Is that a warning from a COO, Harrison asked, or from a man who wrote the plan? Keene's smile didn't move. Get some sleep, he said. He slid back into the car. The door thumped. The car swallowed him. Imani looked at Harrison. He didn't look back right away. He looked at the building, the jacks, the new steel shoulders the old bones wore. He looked at Keller, busying himself with bolts in a way that respected private decisions. He looked at the night, which was thinning into the first gray of morning, the sky loosening its fist. He finally met Imani's eyes. If they push me out, he said, voice even, I'll still have money, and I'll still have a mouth. I can get Juniper into a community land trust. I can set up a fund in perpetuity. I can make noise the board will wish was a lullaby. But the very fast power, the phones are answered now power, gets harder without their letterhead. What do you want me to say? Imani asked. There was no anger left, it had been spent on jacks and affidavits. Don't say anything you don't believe, he said. Just know that I'm going to choose you over them. Something ran along her spine that wasn't fear. It felt like a bridge lowering. She nodded once, and in that nod was a contract not written on paper but on two people who had started the day on opposite sides of a headline. Blue light began to gather at the edges of the street. The city stretched. A bus hissed. Someone opened a deli. The day, careless and generous, arrived. The sirens came with it, not panicked, not predatory. Purposeful. Two unmarked sedans, lights spinning, rolled to the curb. Men and women stepped out in dark coats with badges that flashed like small suns. The woman in front had her hair braided back and her file pressed to her heart. Mr. Vale, she asked, voice clear. Yes, he said, not moving. Detective J. Alvarez, DA's office, she said, lifting the badge. We have questions about the Northlight Alliance and about internal directives sent to subcontractors. We need to bring you in. You're not under arrest. Yet. Imani's breath caught. Tasha swore softly. Diego made a small strangled sound. Keller looked at the floor, the way you do when physics gets tangled up in justice and nobody told you the formula. I'll come, Harrison said, hands visible, voice stripped of defense. But I need to make one call first. He looked at Imani. To make sure the money moves for shoring and temporary relocation stipends before my access gets shut. He stepped aside, dialed, voice urgent but level, giving numbers and wire instructions like a man trying to outrun a closing door. The detective waited, patient as rain. He ended the call and turned back, loosening the tension in his shoulders as if he'd made peace with a choice and its consequences. Detective Alvarez nodded to the unmarked sedan. We appreciate your cooperation, she said. She glanced at Imani, a flicker of recognition in her gaze. We'll be in touch with your counsel, Ms. Brooks. Harrison met Imani's eyes one last time before stepping into the car. Something passed between them that wasn't romance yet and wasn't only alliance, it was a promise, I will come back, and even if I don't, what I put in motion will. The car door closed. The sedan pulled away, tail lights smearing red into the thinning night. Imani stood with the cold and the weight of a building that had been given one more day. Keller tightened a bolt that didn't need tightening. The crowd thinned to neighbors and newscasters and a city that watched without blinking. The sun considered the horizon and the horizon, stubborn, considered if it would accept it. On the alley wall, the shadow of a man with a hard hat slipped once more and then disappeared, someone out there still moving, still planning, still sure they could finish what they'd begun. And somewhere across the river, a boardroom filled with suits and a long table waited to decide who got to hold power over the city story, as if it were theirs to begin with. Brooklyn woke to a soft gray that made the emergency tape look too loud. By 6:45 a.m., Imani was at the church with coffee and a legal pad, the kids' finger paintings clipped on a corkboard behind her like talismans. At 7 sharp, Harrison walked into a glass boardroom 2 miles away and stood before people who'd rather be seen as a skyline than as a mirror. You paused Riverpoint, a director said, brisk. You took responsibility on the record. You've exposed us. I told the truth, Harrison replied. Pause doesn't mean stop. It means fix what we broke and build the part we forgot, trust. Semantics, the director murmured. We're voting to place you on leave. You don't have to, Harrison said, voice carved clean. I'll step down. He slid a folder onto the table. I've already wired $25 million of my personal funds to Harbor Trust, a community land trust we formed at 3:11 a.m. with council. It will purchase Juniper's building and the 2 adjacent lots. I've also pledged to endow Juniper's operating budget for 5 years. The transfer is irreversible. For River Point, I recommend a redesign, a ground lease with community ownership, 30% true affordability, a permanent cultural easement for Juniper. Do it without me, or don't. But I won't do it your way. The room stilled. For a long beat, Money held its breath. You'll regret this, Roland Keene said mildly. I already regret other things more, Harrison replied. This I'll live with. At 9:20, while Detective Alvarez's team served warrants at Northlight's co-working suite and Titan Earthworks yard, the DA's techs pried open a locker and found a reciprocating saw flecked with a familiar robin egg paint and fine gray dust. On a burner phone, text after text. From Arth Keene. Move the stair. Speed it up. You know how. A reply, done. Badge clipped. A photo, a green end sticker, casual as a bruise. At 10, in Judge Price's courtroom, the hearing on a preliminary injunction began. The city attorney led with caution, Morrell with harm, Keller with steel. Imani stood and, for the second time in 12 hours, told a room full of power that Juniper was more than a building. The door opened. Keene arrived with a high-gloss lawyer and a packet of photos showing sinkholes near other century-old foundations. Public safety, the lawyer intoned. The developer's mea culpa is a PR gambit, and the center is a hazard. We request the TRO be lifted and the city allowed to remove compromised sections. Judge Price's pen hovered. In his eyes, a quick equation, safety versus justice, paper versus people. Before he could speak, the inspector from day one stood. His tie was crooked, his courage, finally, wasn't. Your Honor, he said, voice shaking once and then finding a path. My name is Daniel Wilcox, Senior Inspector. I filed the original vacate based on data I trusted. After last night, I pulled my emails. We were pressured by Northlight to designate imminent hazard to expedite adjacent development timelines. I have messages from a deputy commissioner's aide referencing Mr. Keene's office. I bring them now. He held up a flash drive like a fisherman presenting something that could bite. I was wrong. I won't be again. Judge Price's pen dropped like a gavel. Preliminary injunction is granted, he said. No demolition. Immediate shoring continues under independent oversight. The city will restore conditional occupancy when the engineer signs and my monitor agrees. As for Mr. Keene and Northlight, expect subpoenas by lunch. In the hall, Keene brushed past without meeting Harrison's eyes. By noon, the DA issued a warrant. By 1, Keene had vanished. The next 6 weeks moved like a city under rehab. Keller's crew turned midnight bracing into bright morning steel. They threaded new stringers, sistered old beams, and taught the building to carry itself without wincing. Volunteers painted, sanded, made splinters not matter. Harrison, out of a job and, somehow, more himself, spent mornings carrying lumber and afternoons with lawyers building Harbor Trust's bylaws, no sale, no flip, no erasure. He gave testimony to the DA and found that telling the truth, when you have been taught to weaponize it, is its own kind of discipline. Imani ran point like she always had, calendar, casseroles, city calls. She stood with Pastor Ruth at a folding table and sorted donations. She stood with Zuri and turned a closet into a science lab while Malik made Neptune at last, a deep blue planet that dried glossy and perfect on a windowsill. She stood in front of the camera and said, Juniper will reopen, so many times that the words grew muscle. When the inspector resigned and turned state's witness, the deputy commissioner followed, quietly at first, then with a letter that admitted pressure and made names. When Titan's foreman flipped, Keene's disappeared turned into picked up in Delaware, a man who had been powerful enough to ruin a staircase and not powerful enough to outrun a woman with a badge and a file. On a bright Saturday in March, Juniper reopened. The orange notice had been replaced by a gold one, Community Land Trust, owned by the people. The front steps wore chalk in every color. Pastor Ruth blessed the doorway with oil and laughter. Mr. Carpenter led 100 voices in a chorus that begged the roof to hold, and the roof, proud of its new bones, obliged. Ms. Eloise cut the ribbon with a pair of scissors so grand they should have had their own stage name. Diego cried, pretended not to. Tasha pretended to be fine and was. Harrison stood back until Imani tugged him forward. You carried jacks at 2 a.m., she said. You can carry scissors at noon. I don't belong in front, he said. Then stand beside, she replied, and he did. They ate pastelitos and oranges that spray-misted the air like last chances. They pinned new art on old walls that wore it like armor and joy. They unveiled a plaque in the entryway, Juniper Center, held by Harbor Trust, for the neighborhood, forever. And another smaller plaque, tucked beside it, in honor of Mama Joy, who taught us abundance is a practice. As the noise thinned to bustling, Harrison and Imani found the quiet of the second-floor window and the soft reflection of a day both bigger and simpler than any headline. I'm not a hero, he said. I built the reason you had to fight. I'm sorry. You also chose to unbuild it, she said. That doesn't erase, but it counts. I'd like to keep counting, he said. To keep showing up. Not as a savior. As someone who knows how to lift and how to listen. Imani watched the kids run across the courtyard, Malik holding his Neptune like a jewel. Then show up, she said. Slow. Honest. No press release. We build like this, hand to hand. He nodded, eyes less guarded than the first night in the elevator. May I take you to dinner that isn't in a boardroom? She smiled, one corner first, cautious, then all in. Yes, she said. But first you're washing paint trays. They laughed. It felt like a home you choose. Quick reflection and CTA. When a system fails your community, what's the one concrete change you'd fight to put in place? Ownership, oversight, or something else entirely? And who would you want by your side? Share in the comments so others can learn from your blueprint. Just as the music drifted into an easy groove and the block exhaled, a kid in a city hoodie dropped a padded envelope on the welcome desk and vanished into the crowd. No return address. Inside, a flash drive labeled Northlight, deep tier. Harrison's hand hovered, Imani's breath steadied. They plugged it in. A list scrolled, donors, Shell LLCs, a councilman they'd trusted, a media exec, a bank they banked with. The screen flickered as if the file had something else to say. Then a final line, next target, Franklin Arts Collective. Imani and Harrison looked at each other, victory warm in their bones, vigilance waking again. The fight ahead was real. But this time, they weren't alone. And this time, the building they stood in belonged to them. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button for more emotional and heart-touching stories that speak to the soul, and share your thoughts in the comments to tell us which story you want to hear next.